The child of Cinyras and Myrrha is, of course, Adonis, and Ovid points out his growth rather characteristically. The son of his sister by his grandfather, the one so recently hidden within a tree, so recently born, a most beautiful infant, now was an adolescent, and now a young man, even more beautiful than he was as a baby. You can see that in the way the short narrative of his growing up to be a young adult, from an infant to an adolescent to a baby. Now he is this. Now he is that. Short images where the reader is connecting the dots and presuming a continuum, a constant change made up of tiny segments of change, which is consistent with the entire narrative of the Metamorphoses. Cupid. Well, okay. Adonis comes to be the focus of Venus, the goddess of love. Now, remember, Venus kind of started all this off with by granting Pygmalion life for his statue, who is this child's now great grandfather or something like that. So there's some weird intersection here of personalities and generations. Pleasing now even to Venus, and soon the avenger of passionate fires that brought his mother to ruin. So also this notion of vengeance, this notion of a kind of retributive justice that is correcting or compounding past wrongs, depending on how you view it. Cupid is frolicking on Venus's lap one day and accidentally sticks her with an arrow, which of course means that she falls in love with the first thing she sees or whatever, and this turns out to be Adonis, and soon she is swept away. Venus, the goddess of love, the goddess of a kind of luxury and ease and seductiveness, is soon tramping around after her new beloved. Adonis is a hunter. He likes to be outdoors. He likes to be tracking game. He's an outdoorsy type, and she is very much not. But she changes for him. She is overwhelmed by the power of love. Even the goddess of love is overwhelmed by the power of love, and she loses her entire identity to him. She sacrifices her identity to him by trekking around after him, by pretending to be outdoorsy. She girded her garments hitched up and girded around her waist like a nymph of Diana. Diana is a rival of Venus, let's say, the opposite, the huntress. Venus is not supposed to be doing this. Venus is an indoor girl. She's an uptown girl. She's a city girl, let's say. She is not about trekking around in the woods, but she does. An indication of the power of love. The goddess of love, even the goddess of love, will sacrifice her identity. But she gets him to calm down at one point. Says, well, let's just go take a rest. And you see her start to engender her natural state a little bit more. The power of nature is all over this. Her natural state is one of somewhat ease and luxury. And so she guides him to a little, here's a nice little grassy patch. Let's just sit and relax. And, we can lay around in our ease. And she tells him that, she is concerned about him. She is worried about him being a little reckless, particularly around all the wild animals of nature. And she says that, well, okay, she is particularly worried about the more aggressive ones. She says, be bold with the timid, she said, but among the daring, But against the daring, daring is reckless. Spare me, dear boy, the risk involved in your courage. She is concerned that he is a little reckless himself, and she zeroes in particularly on the more aggressive animals out there. For lions and bristling boars and other fierce creatures look with indifferent eyes and minds upon beauty and youth and other qualities Venus is moved by. So here she's kind of arguing for her identity. It is resurfacing. She is identifying herself as against the kind of aggressive brutality of those beasts. And you can't help but notice a certain characteristic of these beasts. She says, Venus is moved by pitiless boars deal out thunderbolts with their curved tusks, and none may withstand the frenzied assault of the lions, whom I despise altogether. Dealing out thunderbolts. Interesting characterization. Gee, who deals out thunderbolts? Jove. Dealing out thunderbolts. Jove is the is the alpha male of the Olympian set. And she is perhaps finding that kind of aggressiveness a little coarse. She says, that is indifferent eyes upon beauty. It's not just that they are aggressive, it's that they're kind of brutish and they don't respect beauty and art and all the things that she is perhaps a little bit more comfortable with. Again, she's the indoor cat. There is all of that struggle for identity going in there. There is all of that concern with, I see things a little differently, and I want you to respect my wishes on this. And she does zero in on the lions bit there and the boars. She says also, of course, the boars with the tusks. Tusks are always identified as somewhat phallic. So there's a certain male quality that she is arguing against here. And remember the question of androgyny that is running throughout Ovid. She tells a story to try and illustrate, because he asks, why do you single out lions? What's the problem with that? And she decides, okay, I'm going to tell this story to illustrate my opinion, or explain my opinion, let's say. She's going to use a narrative to convey meaning. So she is, in a sense, an artist in this. She is an author. And she tells a story of a young girl named Atalanta, who is very beautiful, but the instruction to her is that she cannot ever marry. The gods decide she cannot marry, so she needs anybody who wants to marry her. They come up with this thing where they have to beat her in a race. She is very fast, apparently, a young track star. The problem being with, if they lose the race, they have to die. They are killed. And of course, men start lining up. Hey, I'll take that action. I can beat that girl. And none of them can. Finally, there is a guy who stands up and says, yeah, I think I can do it. Well, that's what they've been saying all along, because, guys. Hippomenes says, he comes up and he says, all right, yeah, that I can do that. I can do that. And he does that. He arranges, after a funny flirtation where Atalanta is not particularly interested, and he's, scoping her out, they strike a deal. He is going to try it. But it's this funny little negotiation, this funny little flirtation, where he even references, or he blows up the situation they're in, exaggerating it. comparing it even to, the great slaughter of suitors, which is a parallel of Odysseus and Penelope, quite frankly. The idea that he is the hero who is going to come in, and after all of the other suitors, all of Atalanta's other suitors, have all died, he is going to come in as the hero. So it's already sort of in this story, which is supposed to convey meaning, already referencing other stories and sort of showing a flip side to them. So it's a complicated narrative knot that Ovid is serving up here. He gets a little divine help. He is given 3 golden apples, and by the gods. He is given these 3 golden apples, and of course, the golden apple makes you think automatically of the whole Judgment of Paris issue. So again, we have another story layered underneath this story, and they race, and Atalanta is just sort of breezing along, humoring him. Yeah, and he's struggling. And at a certain point, he takes one of the golden apples out of his bag and tosses it, and she goes, "Ooh, shiny object. Let me get that." She races off, picks up the apple. Ooh. And he gets ahead. But then she gets back on the track and starts running, and she catches up, and she just passes him again. So he takes out another from his bag, and over to the side. Hey, golden apple, shiny object. Whoa, look at this. And she goes and she catches up again, and he's going, but now he's a little bit lighter from having lost all of the 2 previous golden apples. So now he can run a little bit faster. And as they're reaching the finish line, he takes the 3rd one, tosses it, and she runs and catches it, and he crosses the finish line and wins. So he wins the thing. He wins the right to marry her. And one thing leads to another, and they find themselves essentially in a temple. A temple of Cybele, who is a goddess associated, among other things, with the castration of cult members to her, and overcome by passion. They have, after their initial flirtation, perhaps they have been, they've caught each other's number. She is a little bit more impressed with him, and he's still a little like, okay, I conquered her. And, well, nature takes its course in the temple, or on the temple grounds, at least. That's a no-no. You don't get too friendly on a sacred site. And as a consequence, they have to metamorphosize themselves into lions. And Venus is telling this story on that grove to Adonis to talk about being carried away, to talk about being, to letting your passions get the most of you. Now, again, this is the goddess of love conveying a message of moderation and stoicism, even. So that's a little complicated right there. But, okay, he listens to the story, and she thinks, okay, I made my point. I'm going to go back to Olympus now, or wherever she's going. She has things to do. So she takes off, and he goes hunting again, because that's what he does. He's a hunter. And so while he's hunting, he sees a boar, and he goes and he tries to nail it with his spear, boar, and he just kind of, little glancing blow, doesn't really break the skin or anything. And the boar turns on him, charges, and gores him in the groin, castrating him. Now remember the connection with castration initially, and Adonis is killed. because he could not let go of his excitement for hunting, because he got swept up in the thrill of the chase. You can go into that an awful lot. His cries, apparently that's quite painful. I'm sure it is. His cries alert Venus, who is off in the distance now, but now she rushes back and sees him, and he dies in her arms, and she swears that, okay, you know, you will not be gone forever, because I'm going to. She transforms him into a field of flowers, and there we have the anemone or something like that. And so he becomes another form of plant life. We have certainly seen an awful lot of that. But the questions are everywhere. This is a kind of nature reclaiming itself. He grows up as a field of flowers, nature reasserting itself, just like the unnatural pairing. This is the only offspring, remember, of the initial unnatural pairing of Pygmalion and his statue, which gave rise to Cinyras and Myrrha. So it started with an unnatural pairing of one man and his art, one man and his lust for himself and his own expression, and then it goes to an incestuous relationship between a father and son, arguably another example of one man lusting unnaturally for his creation. And now Adonis is the victim of that. Nature has reclaimed. Nature has corrected an aberration. Nature is constantly evolving. Nature is constantly growing. Nature is constantly metamorphizing and changing. But the state of change in nature is constant. That's the message, I would say, of the story of Atalanta and Hippomenes. They're as cool as they appeared to be. They were overwhelmed by love. The nature of love was overpowering, just like it was overpowering for Venus. The goddess of love could not even withstand that kind of energy. Nature is change. Nature is constant change. And anything you do in the face of that will ultimately be overwhelmed.